This is the Emerson E2 controller, also known as the CPC controller historically. I'm going to introduce some of the hardware components of the controller. Notice the buttons. We've got function buttons, F1, F2, F3, F4, F5. The oval button, the help screen, the alarm screen, the home screen, the menu screen, and the escape button. There's also important to note the control button, the alt button, the login button, and the cursor movement buttons, which we'll get to later. Inside the controller, you'll see the communication wires coming from the input-output boards, the power wire for the controller, the toggle reset switch, and most applications you'll see an Ethernet cable that communicates to other controllers within the building. I'm going to show the hotkeys that we recommend to use. Alt-O for status outputs, Alt-I for status of the inputs, Alt-N for status of the network boards, Control-N is for names mode. To continue with the overview of the hardware of this system, there are input-output boards. Emerson uses the name multiflex boards for the input-output boards. The inputs are along the bottom. So there's 16 inputs. Each of these inputs can be either analog or digital input. They have to accept either a 0 to 5 volt input or a resistance input. And it's the type of input is selected using the dip switches S1 and S2 down in this area here. There's 2 banks of dip switches for all the 16 sensors. The sensors also have a voltage value, a voltage available for some sensors need voltage. So these are 12 or 5 volt outputs for your sensor. Dew point sensors or humidity sensors often need power at the board. So that would be something to check for if that power is not wired properly for your humidity sensor, a common issue. Moving on, the outputs, the digital relay outputs, there's 8 of them across the top here. The associated output is on when that light is on. Similar to these up here, you've got 3 relays that are showing on. You can wire these relays either normally open or normally closed. So your programming has to accommodate that value of the closure or the opening of the relay. This board, not all boards have it, but this one has what's called an analog output. There's 4 analog outputs that can produce 0 to 10 volt signal. The communication wire to the controller is parallel to each other and then back to the main controller. The boards have a number, a board address number, and the dip switches S3 and S4 have to be adjusted to the correct board address. The relay outputs have to be addressed. The analog output also has to be addressed, and the analog input has to be addressed. So this board needs 3 addresses numbered, same as the one up here. 3 board addresses, because one's for the relay outputs, one's for the analog outputs, and one for the inputs. So that's the dip switches are here for the board addresses. There is fail-safe dip switches. If the board loses communication, it will default the relays to these values. Most of the time these are all down, except for our fan. Seasons 4 will frequently have the default value for the fail-safe to on. Then this is power for the board. If you're changing any dip switches, it's recommended to change dip switches and power down and power up the board. Worthy of note for the input-output boards is this flashing light right here below the COM wire is an amber light flashing, indicating good communication to the E2 controller. We will disconnect this just to show you that we lose this flashing light when we lose the communication to the controller. To navigate the E2 controller, touch any button to activate the screen on. You will now need to log in by pressing the login button noted earlier, and you will need to have a level 4 username and password. This controller is set up at level 4 is user, enter pass, enter. You are now logged in at level 4. You also now need to make sure that you have toggled on and verify full options. You'll see the full signal up there, but to verify that you have it, you go to Menu, number 7, System Configuration, and number 3, System Information, and then select number 8 to toggle on or off full options. You want to toggle on full options. When complete, escape out. And now we can carry on to navigate to a network status. This screen is the communication of the controller to the input-output boards. I will move the cursor down. The first 2 input boards are online. You can see over the right-hand side in the green online information. But I've purposely put in 2 other boards that are offline. So you will see very clearly by hitting the Alt-N to get to this screen which boards are online and offline. So if you're having difficulties with your system, you need to verify that your board is communicating with this controller. One more time, Alt-N will get you to this screen. Once complete here, escape out. Now you can go to Alt-O. Alt-O takes you to the status screen of the relay outputs, and I recommend that you use Control-N to get into the names mode, which gives you more information about each output point's name and where its association is. You can move up and down through this screen over to the values and see the status of your fan, for example. Right now is showing off. We'll come to that later. You can now escape back to the main screen and hit Alt-I. Alt-I takes you to the status screen of all the inputs, digital and analog. Again, you will see that we're in names mode with Control-N on, and there's plenty of information to tell you what each of these inputs are. You've got temperatures, and you also have, for example, fan proof, which is a digital input, a dry closure. Important to notice is that there are orange with yellow written words showing that we are missing some sensors that are set up and the program expects to see it. So that if you see orange in this screen, we might need to see attention to resolving that. So that's Alt-I. Now let's go back to main screen, and another key thing for Seasons 4 equipment is going into what we call the air handler application. So you press Menu, and the first line in the menu is Air Handling Unit. Hit Enter. This program has 2 air handlers. So you will move your cursor up and down to select which one you want to look at and press enter. If there was only one air handler set up in this program, it would have automatically gone to the only air handler setup. We are going to look a little closer at some common screens and how to override certain values. I'm going to go into the Alt-O screen, which is the status outputs, and I'm going to move over to the fan output. I'm going to hit the enter button. I'm going to move down to the override feature. I'm going to say yes, arrow down, and I'm going to type the word on. Enter. You will now see a blue highlighted value of on for that output. So anytime you see a blue highlight on a screen, on a status screen, you are in override. To unoverride it, you hit enter again, move to the override, and you say no. Enter, enter, enter. And now the override is back off. So since we are doing the fan proof, the fan on-off override, I'm going to override it on, say yes, say on, enter, and so now if your fan turns on, you should expect to see in the input screen an on value for your fan proof if this is all working properly. Back to the output screen, if you have analog outputs, you will see, for example, you have a VFD for the fan, and we want to override that fan from 100% that it's currently reading to 75%. We hit enter, move to the override, say yes, enter, enter, and we'll put in 75 as the value and hit enter, and now you will see the VFD has been adjusted to 75%. Now let's look at overriding an input. So hit Alt-I, and you can move your cursor over to, for example, the sales temperature in this case. Press enter, move the arrow to override, say yes, enter, enter, and we'll put in 69 degrees as the value and press enter. Similar to the outputs, you'll see a blue highlight, and now the value for this whole controller is showing as 69 for that input number 1. Also within the Alt-I environment, if you move your cursor to a value and you hit enter, you can hit select number 1 menu for graph, and you will see a timeline of the information that's showing in the controller for that particular input value. And you can zoom in with the F5 function key and zoom out with the F4 function key, and then escape back to that main screen of the status input. In the Alt-I screen, the status screen for the inputs, if you go to a value and you hit enter, and you go to number 5 setup, you will find that there is a place for a sensor offset. Many times there is a large value in that sensor offset that is confusing the program. Seasons 4 recommends that most sensor offsets be 0. A common screen for our Seasons 4 equipment is the air handler application. Let's access the air handler application. Press menu, select number 1, choose rooftop unit number 1 in this case. And now you will see a summary screen of all the key important information of control temperature of the zone, the fan on or off, the humidity levels, and which heat and cooling stages are activated. I am going to show how to override to unoccupied. I have moved the cursor to the word occupied for occupancy. Press enter, press override, say yes, arrow down, and type the word unoc for unoccupied, UNOCC, enter, and you will see that I am highlighted blue in that main status screen of the air handler. If I wanted to override that to occupied, I say yes and type OCC, enter. I am now in override occupied. And then finally, if I want to unoverride that occupancy, I select the override menu and I say no to the override, enter, enter, enter. A common control problem that can be an alarm situation for the E2 controller is fan fail. I'm going to walk through the next steps on how to clear a fan fail. First place you might want to look is up in the top right-hand screen that you'll have a flashing alarm. That may or may not be a fan alarm, but at least you know that there's an alarm occurring. Press the alarm button on this keypad, and you will see in this particular case that the start-stop fan out fan proof failure is showing up several times on here. So in order to get the fan to run, I'm not going to clear it yet. I'm going to back out and go into the air handler, and just to show you what we've got here. So the fan is now over, it is alarmed off, and the fan proof is off. And the fan is in alarm as seen on the alarm screen. So let's go back to the alarm screen, press the alarm button, and we've already logged in as level 4. You hit the F3 button for alarm clear, and you select B for all advisories, and that will clear the alarm. And now if we quickly go back to the status screen of the air handler, you'll see that the fan is now calling on, and if the fan proof comes on, you're now in good shape. You have cleared the alarm. That, again, one more time, this is a common alarm for fan to not be calling, and all we have to do is clear the alarms. Setting up the main air handler program is important because this is where all the set points are located, how many cooling and heating and reclaim stages are set up. So I'm going to go through programming an air handler application. So we go menu, 1 for air handler, select air handler number 1. Now, to get into the programming environment of the air handler application, press F5 for setup. It takes us right to a general screen, and you'll notice that the name of the application is first and foremost, and the strategy type. You'll see this one is set up for separate set points. There are separate set points, normal, and T-stat. We are going to step through the separate set points strategy for this programming example. It's controlled by space temp. We have 1 space temp. We have 2 heat reclaim stages, 4 auxiliary heat stages, and 2 cool stages. The fan type will be a single speed most of the time. There is an option for 2-speed and variable speed, but we normally will select single speed at seasons 4. Arrow down to dew point or dehumidify by. We select F4 to see the options. You have options of humidity, dew point, humidistat, dew point Celt. Most of the time, seasons 4 will be using dew point. Select the dew point. So now we press F2 for set points menu. This doesn't populate very much in the separate set points, so we can sort of pass through this, just use the default value there. Inputs, these are where all the pointers are coming in from. Sensors for space temperature, outdoor temperature, occupancy mode. Next, press F2. These are outputs. So the first one is a pointer pointing out to the hardware for the fan on-off and any other special outputs that might go to information in other applications. In the heat-cool setup, there is some freestat information. Again, this is not necessarily needed, just choose the default values there. Heat-cool stages is critical. This is where you point out to the hardware for your heats 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In this case, 2 of the heats, the stages 1 and 2 are reclaim stages, and the 3, 4, 5, 6 are the auxiliary heat stages. Those are pointing out. Cool 1, cool 2, pointing out to the compressor 1, compressor 2 stages. F2 for the next menu. Fan mode is continuous. You do have, if you press F4, you'll get the option for auto. Auto means it will turn the fan off if space conditions are satisfied. Season 4 always uses continuous. You can put some time delays here and there. This is for occupied and the unoccupied. All of this should be all continuous. And important to notice here is this fan proof in pointer. That's coming from the fan proof digital input, and whether that's on or off. Right below that, arrow down, is the fan proof fail delay. That's usually 3 minutes. For this display, I've showed 30 seconds, but usually 3 minutes before there's any alarm that the fan proof has failed. Arrow down further, you'll see maximum retries. That's 10 times the fan is going to try to turn on if there's been a fan proof fail. And below that is the auto restart delay. That's the time delay between each of the 10 tries. Usually it's 10 minutes. I've put 30 seconds in for this information. When you get to 10 tries, the fan is locked out and you have to clear all the alarms and toggle on and off the controller with the toggle switch inside the control box. F2 to advance fan. No need to change anything in there. Default values are fine. The dehum tab. Critical on this page is the cool dehum stages. That should match exactly what's back on the general tab, which I'm F1ing back to the general tab, and you'll see we have 2 cool stages. Good. And if we go to the dehum menu, again, 2 cool stages. Arrow down to number of reclaim stages. In this case, we know there was 2. That 2 should match the front end in the general tab. And then you're allowed to turn on the auxiliary heat with this next field for auxiliary heat during dehumidification. If you want 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 0 stages of auxiliary heat during dehumidification to warm the building up, you're allowed to include it here. Arrow down to the set point for dehumidification value. This is dew point. If you remember, we selected dew point. Occupied value of 51.5, that's a good number. Dehumidification during unoccupied, also 51.5. Dead band of 1 degree dew point. dead band of 1 degree dew point, good numbers, good numbers. Another key bit of information on this page is the minimum space dehum. The default value is 65 degrees. Many people will think that it's a good idea to raise that to 70 or 72 so that it doesn't get too cold in the store. But in this case, with this controller, that shuts off too much compressors, and you have other problems to deal with if 70 or 65 is not the right number. So use 65 there. F2 to the next, you'll see that my cursor up at the top is on a more, highlighting the word more. But there's more menus. That just means more menus are coming. So this lands on the cool set points. This is where you have cut in, cut out. So we cut on at 74.75 degrees Fahrenheit inside the store, and it'll cut off stage 1 at 73.75 degrees. It is key to notice that we are going from a high to a low value in this set point. This controller will accept a higher number in error, and won't catch it for you. So be extra careful that that 73 degrees showing here is lower than the cut on of 74 degrees. We recommend time delays in here of 30 seconds or 1 minute at the most. There's plenty of time built in for delays due to the temperature changing. Hit F2 for the next menu, and this is the heat set points. So opposite to the cooling stages, this is where the cut on will be, in this case, 72, and now the cut off of the furnace or reclaim heat will be higher. So in this case, 73 degrees. Again, this is a critical point to note that you can accidentally put in a value lower, it'll turn on and never turn off. So it's critical that that value is, the cutoff is higher for the heat. And we'll move on to the next menu, which is the fail emergency. Default for this menu, fine. And the alarm paging, the default for this is also fine. So we are done setting up the strategy using separate set points. We are now going to move to what does the normal strategy look like. F4, select the normal strategy, and you'll get some slightly different populated fields when you choose that. And most of them stayed the same on this page that I need to worry about. We still have 2 cool stages, 2 heat reclaim stages for auxiliary heat. The real difference is when I hit F2 and I go to this set point page, you'll see that we now have summer cool occupied, summer cool unoccupied set points. These are just single set points for the space temperature for cooling mode, a single set point for heat mode during occupied. And actually what I'm showing on the screen are pretty good numbers, 75 for cool mode, 71 for heat mode. The key here is to avoid accidentally putting in a heat mode temperature that is above the cooling mode. The inputs and outputs very much the same as the previous discussion on setting up this air handler. And this page here, heat cool setup, this is critical. You'll see that we now have some other things in the this field. For example, the heat I gain. If you build this from scratch, that will say 0.25. That is a value that brings on the furnaces too fast. I recommend you call seasons for the correct number, but a 0.05 is a safe number to use in that for most applications. Further down is the cool I gain. Also, if you make this from scratch, it'll say 0.25. This shows 0.09 for the cool eye gain. A default value of 0.09 for Seasons 4 programming is highly recommended. Again, this is a little bit advanced programming. Feel free to call Seasons 4 to discuss this further if necessary. F2 to the heat cooling stages. Again, these are the outputs to the actual hardware. General fan is exactly the same as separate set point, so continuous is critical. Advanced fan default screen there is fine. So now we're on the DHUM tab, and a little bit different here. We have, again, the same DHUM stages and heat stages, reclaim stages that we choose. The dehumidification dew point set point of 51.5 is the same, but we don't have the deadband anymore because this is now being controlled on a PID loop, and a temperature throttle range for the DHUM of 22 is recommended in this case. So key on this page is this DHUM TR. Change the default value to 22. I believe the default value is down near 4 or 5, which is too fast. So moving through to the next stages of, or the next menus, we don't have the separate cooling and heating space set points. Those are gone because we're doing the normal mode now. So the rest of these menus are the default programming, and these are all just fine. And we are now complete with our programming of the air handler, both separate set points and normal strategy.